So first of all, thanks to BSides for having the event, and you all should take a moment, thank an organizer, thank a sponsor, and thank a volunteer, because without them, the event wouldn't happen. So thank you to them, first of all. So this talk is not a threat intel talk. So let's get that out of the way first and foremost. There's a lot of those. There's a great one at LabsCon I recommend you go check out a few weeks ago. It's pretty great. I'm not going to do a threat intel talk. So if that's what you're here for, I don't know why you're clapping, but I'm happy. That's good. So anyways, this is not a threat intel talk. You might not like this talk at all because I'm going to say some things that might be inflammatory or like piss you off a little bit. And that's kind of the point. This talk's a little bit about tough love. It's a little bit about like getting us to do better and a call to arms as a community. So with that, let's get started. This meme never gets old. In this case, I think it's hugely appropriate, and I challenge any of you to change my mind. I'm going to walk through a few things that will maybe give you a little hope by the end, but we'll see. You can give me feedback on that later. So when it comes to team goals, who's killing it these days? You probably have OKRs if you're part of an engineering team. What do you think LAPSUS has? What are their goals? So they want to get money. They want to grief people and troll people, maybe swat you. They want to have some lulls, and maybe they want some open source NVIDIA drivers, right? So if you track LAPSUS, like you get that last part. If you haven't, that's okay, you can read about it. I don't recommend you necessarily waste your time. But they're crushing their goals. Like I would promote every single person on this team if I was their manager. Like they're redefining expectations, right? Yeah, cool. So your company, your organization, your CISO, you, your CFO, your CEO, your board of directors, what do they want? What are their goals? Make money, but also like not get wrecked. How are we doing there? Not so good, right? So they're kicking our butts, and they're continuing to kick our butts. So we should probably do something about that. Yeah, well, I'll say more about that in a minute. So who's winning? Obviously, LAPSUS is winning. Like, I'm not going to go through a victimology list either because I don't have enough slides for that in time. And if you want to study LAPSUS victimology, it's a very, very long list of very marquee names that we should all be very concerned about. So here's the agenda. Who am I? That's the least important thing. Who are LAPSUS? Much more important. How are they winning? And let's talk about some mitigations, more mitigations, and why are they winning? Probably because of some of the mitigations. And I'll talk about some key takeaways, have some suggestions, and then maybe time for Q&A. I don't know. So we'll see how this goes. It all depends on how many questions you all choose to ask or not. So who am I? Like I said, least important slide here. I've done offensive security. I've led detection and response, done threat intel, and infrastructure and enterprise security at a few places you've probably heard of, maybe a few of the things on your phone. Now, I'm a director of threat detection and response at Remitly. We're a Seattle-based consumer-to-consumer remittances company, and we're hiring. So who are they? Who are LAPSUS? You notice I put an asterisk earlier. For the rest of this talk, and just lazy web style, I'm always going to say LAPSUS because it's easy. Nobody's going to talk about dev or storm or whatever. I'll walk through that in a second. But let's just call them LAPSUS, even though they're sort of not the same group anymore. So they're called Octopus by some, they're called Scattered Spider, Unc 3944, Muddled Libra, Storm 0875, and LUCR3. Like, this is part of our problem in nomenclature, but that's a different talk. It doesn't really matter who they are. We'll just call them LAPSUS. It's a large amorphous group that's changed over time. Their objectives are mostly consistent, but also evolving too. So we'll just call them LAPSUS. So, so some of you recognize this picture. And does anybody want to yell out who they think this is? White. Yeah, that guy. His real name is Ariane Kataj, and I think he was 16 at the time this picture was taken. This is when he was doing dirty, like getting people swatted, breaking into places, SIM swapping crypto people, maybe involved with other large-scale incidents. So he got arrested. Because he's a minor, You won't find this picture in a lot of places. He's an adult now. But this is the face of LAPSUS. And this is who our adversary is. And sort of like this face I have a problem with because it's a broad brush that gets applied as like, oh, they're just teenagers, which is another problem we have. Don't trivialize them. I think when we call them teenagers, we're trivializing them, and I don't think they're all teenagers. I think there's evidence to back that up. And even if they are teenagers, they're kicking our butts. So it doesn't really matter how old they are. So let's talk about how they're winning. They have a lot of skills. They are excellent social engineers. A lot of them came out of the video game community, and there is a rich history of video game community internal abuse, player-on-player abuse, going back decades. So this community is ripe for opportunities like this where people become good at social engineering. They are excellent social engineers. They are excellent at recon. They do their homework. They put the work in to know who their targets are. They do research on LinkedIn. They know org structures, sometimes better than companies internally do themselves, and you can map all this out through OSINT techniques. You don't need, excuse me, you don't need to necessarily sit back and say, well, we can't possibly know these things. They know them, and they know them very well. They have and use dump data. So every time there's a data breach, they're pretty quick studies on those. They look for things like your email address, which may be a primary key in a database of theirs that you might want to construct if you were them. So maybe a personal email, your first and last name, maybe your home address, maybe all your phone numbers, and certainly where you work at the time. And I've noticed through target selection, they are usually faster at updating their lists of people to organizations and jobs than direct sales people are, or direct sales platforms are. So that's scary, but also a good takeaway. Again, teenagers, right? They're outperforming Salesforce that way. They are extremely proficient at SIM swapping. SIM swapping, if you don't know, is the act of migrating one's cellular phone number to another device, usually without your knowledge. They're very, very good at that, and I've used that prolifically, as have a few others. They also buy credentials. You can buy creds in a lot of places. You can buy creds, you can buy cookies, and they're very, very cheap. Allegedly, the Slack token that was the sort of like entry point to the Uber incident with them was $8. No exploitation, no malware, just take some BTC, $8. Who wouldn't want to pay that? Super cheap. They have a very high operational tempo. And I would argue they have a higher operational tempo than most SOC teams. And I say that because you can see them stand up infrastructure, do initial tests, and whale their targets within hours now. So their time to target selection when they stand up infrastructure and deploy is just a few hours. So it's becoming very, very challenging to track them and disrupt them or protect against them. They have demonstrated experience with IDPs and SSOs. If you haven't read it, I highly encourage you to read Okta's recent blog post on this topic. And again, coming back to like people being dismissive of them as teenagers that are unskilled, that's complete BS. They're very good at understanding IDPs and SSOs. And you should read that Okta article if you haven't. It's very informative. They're trained on the platform. And Okta has hypothesized, maybe they have some other data, that the LAPSUS actors behind some of these incidents have actually taken training. Interesting. They're also skilled with traditional lateral movement tools. There's another slide on TTPs next. Some of those map to another group you may have heard of, APT28. So again, if we're dismissive of them as teenagers, they're bringing the same tools and techniques that some other much more advanced adversaries have been deploying for years. So let's talk about their TTPs. They SMS and voice phish people on personal lines, almost exclusively on personal lines, where you have no visibility for corporate devices. Very intentional and deliberate. They use legitimate remote access tools where they socially engineer employees to try and install their tools and give them remote hands-on keyboard to their corporate devices. They are very proficient at multiple phishing toolkits that can be deployed to real-time intercept OTP and or do push verifications. Like EvilGenX 2 has been around for a while. They're on that. They're on some other things. They're very, very good at that. They also are really good at getting people to accept pushes when they shouldn't be accepting pushes. So what we discovered in the last couple of years is that people, just like security people get alert fatigue, people get push fatigue. And eventually they want to go to sleep, and so they just click yes. And they don't understand why. They're also prolific with using commercial VPNs and proxies. In the last 12 months or so, they've evolved to attack third-party providers that may be entry points into other organizations. For example, you may have read about the Retool incident a few weeks ago. I'm not saying LAPSUS did that, but go look at the Retool customer list on their homepage. You might have some insights as to who they're going after. Insider recruiting. If you made millions off of cryptocurrency theft, you can pay someone $20,000 to just give you access. Like, go to a T-Mobile store. The people there probably aren't making that much. And again, back to the open source tools that they use, or public domain tools, IAMPacket, Minidump, PowerShell, regquery, like pretty basic, lolbins. These are the same stuff APT28's been using for a long time, in addition to Responder. So again, this is approximately their class of TTPs. Let's talk about mitigations. These are not computer mitigations, right? These are just like general good life health advice, right? So let's apply this. This is not a bad metaphor. Let's apply it to our domain. So what's the equivalent of like eating your vegetables? What's the equivalent of taking a walk and not smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day? Like, chances are if you eat bacon 3 meals a day and smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day, you're gonna have heart disease or heart attack and probably cancer. Like, that's predictable. So again, same metaphor applies to InfoSec. So we have 2 large categories of problems. One, corporate account takeover. Employees reuse passwords, they show up in dumps. And even if they don't reuse the same exact password, if I have 3 of your passwords over time, I might be able to construct a pattern that's easily extrapolatable. Phishing, MFA abuse, and then the other bucket is malware and rats on computers. So there's malware from initial access brokers, there's malware that they might trick you to deploy, and there's remote access tools. It might be legit remote access tools, it might not be. Those are large, like 2 categories of problems. Category 2, they steal cookies and creds, and they have reverse proxies. So bring your own desktop, I think, should be redefined to bring your own disaster. If you are trying to defend against LAPSUS or any threat actor like them, you are blind and you can't hear. Highly, highly discourage BYOD unless you have full control over endpoints, which you almost never do. So Microsoft issued their 2023 Digital Defense Report just recently. It's long, but it's rich. Encourage you to take a look. It's not an easy URL to remember, but that's okay. Just highly encourage you to take a look at that, especially as it regards BYOD. If you need ammo, it's all in there. So, and if you have BYOD and you don't have full admin on the box, you don't have agents, you don't have the ability to do things like issue and revoke certs, get EDR data, et cetera, bad day. So we have to solve corporate account takeovers, we have to solve endpoint malware, and we have to detect these things really quickly. So super easy, right? Like, we'll be done by Tuesday. That's it, just those things. So how do we impose costs? Coming back to the health metaphor, we need prevention, and we need hygiene, and we need detection. So this is like very basic, and I'm sorry if you think this is very basic, but somebody needs to hear it because we don't do it. Password managers work. I mean, the last year, I wouldn't recommend one of them, but I think you know. Use the one that can't recover your passphrases. It works. And on top of that, it will mitigate phishing if people know how it works. Have a sensible password policy and hopefully make it unique to your SSO. Again, if you can get employee dumps, you can know their passwords. And you can tell them their passwords, which they will be shocked to hear. But that's what the attackers have, so why can't we? Just listen to NIST. NIST has really good guidance on this. It's not crazy. It's like, use a multi-word passphrase that you can remember. Don't require silly combos. There's no computational advantage to this. Like Stanford University has a great write-up on the time it takes to crack different kinds of passwords. And it confirms what NIST is saying, because NIST also has the same research. Don't force people to change them. That's not helpful. And then monitor it for your employees and dumps. Now, even better, let's talk about FIDO2 and WebAuthn. FIDO2 or WebAuthn is usually associated with YubiKeys. I'm not a brand person, but I have friends that work there, full disclosure. I think they're great, but who cares? Like, you can get any kind of security key you want that's FIDO2 compliant, good day. Like, get Phaeton, get Titan, get whatever floats your boat, like, just get one. And even better, if you can use it in WebAuthn mode. Because WebAuthn means you don't need passwords anymore. So, since Google has gone to security keys, and they're very open and transparent about this, they've talked about it publicly, they've had exactly 0 corporate account takeovers since they have globally enforced those. And they were a huge target. Exactly 0. So I won't say it's impossible, but it's kind of impossible today. And even better, if you don't have passwords, your employees will know they don't have a password. So when somebody calls them on the phone and says, type your password into this thing I just texted you, they're going to know it's shenanigans, right? Very, very easy to figure that out. So push is also, like I have a bee in my bonnet about push. If you've ever done offense, even if you haven't, I'd encourage you to go take whatever SSO or IDP you have at work, create yourself an integration, and start sending, name it whatever you want. It won't actually matter that much, and just start randomly pushing your employees. This is the month for it, right? The Security Awareness Month, like, get after it. Do this, and you will get security keys. Because I've done this, and the floor, best case is 20% accept rates. 2-0. Worst is over 30. So 1 in 3. I don't know, like, we know this, let's do something about it. If you, back to BYOD, if you can't control device and user certs for machines that are connecting to your infrastructure, that's a bad day. I recommend you have the ability to do both authentication and access time enforcement for certificates, and do mutual TLS even better. But if you don't have that capability, you should try and get it. It's integrated into a lot of platforms. I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus. There's just like disparity in feature sets between IDPs. Microsoft, ironically, does a great job at this. Okta does not. You can't do this with Okta. Sad. Another topic, compartmented admin access. Are any of you like OG Active Directory people? Like, that's how I first started, like way back in the day. Anybody heard of Red Forest? This is not a new idea, right? Compartment your admin access. So what this means in practice is that you have an admin account and you have an admin device. So Jason Craig at Remitly doesn't do admin work. Like, that's the one I use for everything else. And if I have admin work and if I have admin privileges, I don't use my regular account for that. And it's much, much easier to harden that account than it is to harden my regular account. It's browsing the web, reading email, clicking on random crap. Definitely recommend that. And admin devices, like, I have a Chromebook. It's a pain for presenters, works really well. Enclave your infrastructure and your management tools where possible. Like, everybody forgets about the stuff that manages your laptops. They do a lot of hygiene on admin accounts, admin privileges, whether it's AD, whether it's Octo, whether it's Azure AD, and they forget about the things that like actually manage your laptops. So if you can take those over and or exploit a path via a trust model from an account to those management tools, you're gonna have a bad day. So try and minimize that where possible. Similarly, if you're using auth grants, try and lock those down. Because if you have hardened passwordless authentication via security key, and if you have a hardened device, your attack space is roughly OAuth integrations and Chrome extensions, if you browser extensions generally. Those are much more solvable for admin accounts than for like everybody. So one of the things that makes me really sad every year to be in this industry is to go walk around the RSA show floor every year and ask vendors what their products do. And not like trolling them, but I'll ask vendors like, what does your product do? And zero trust has been a buzzword for the last few years. And I challenge you to find 2 people at the same vendor that have the same definition of what their zero trust tool does. Now go talk to 10 vendors, you're probably gonna have 50 answers, right? So I don't mean like the vendor model, I mean like doing this for real. And when I say that, I mean like you ensure that you have a managed healthy device and it's up to date for whatever your standard of managed healthy device is, and you can know that from telemetry that you get. Trustworthy agents, there are commercial ones, you can build your own. My old team at Pinterest built one called Zool. It's from Ghostbusters, as you might imagine. It's the gatekeeper, and it's great. We built a custom IDP because we didn't like what we saw in the market. I don't recommend you do that. Do not recommend. Like, I would buy today versus building ourselves, but what we did then, we didn't have available in the market at the time. So these types of agents at, whether it's Okta, Azure AD, whatever, at authentication and access time, your agent will talk to the service, and the service will do some back-end work, query a bunch of other disparate systems like, is my EDR running right now? Do I have logs within a specific time bucket? And are these specific desired state configurations in their desired state? And if no, then they get a warning to say go away, like call IT, or they get a hard block that says go away, come back later. Not super hard in practice for the technical bits, a little bit harder for the social bits. And they basically just ask each other, are you good? And the device will say, yeah, I'm good. And then you double check, you don't trust the device on its own. So coming back to a more hygiene and hardening, binary allow listing agents are really, really good. I saw some statistic recently that Mac OS is about 30% of all Fortune 500 compute devices for end users today. So it's about 1/3. We can't really leave Macs out of like traditional blue chip, like Fortune 100 companies. So there's an option for that. I read this morning like Santa has a new release this week. Santa's great, it's authored by Google, it's performant, it's reliable, and it works. There are many options for Windows, like a lot more actually than Mac OS. I'm not gonna recommend any of them, but Santa's great for Mac. Coming back to the threat landscape you have to deal with for OAuth grants or browser extensions, look for browser extensions. It's actually easier today than it was 10 years ago. We have tools. OS Query has been around for 10 years, but not publicly. OS Query can allow you to collect browser extension data for almost every browser extension you could possibly want, almost every browser you could possibly want. Edge being Chromium based now, it's even easier. It's a good tool, get after it. And then you can do things like explicit allow lists. Like I don't recommend you do a ban list, or I don't recommend you only do a ban list because you're gonna be playing whack-a-mole all day, and that's not a race you wanna compete in because you're gonna lose. Like one day you will lose. So if you have an explicit allow list, that's even easier. So even better than binary allow listing for your general purpose device, like get a Chromebook. They work well enough for most use cases. I've been using one personally for a long time. And you can do one with some kinds of engineering work, but not all. But like most Office users, you can kind of get by. So coming back to like my first love, detection, highly recommend you build reporting flows if you don't have them yet. And your reporting flow should accommodate the model that LAPSUS and friends are using, which again is like SMS and voice phishing. So voice phishing, they can't just email you, they can't take a screenshot and forward it. But if they get an SMS, they can screenshot that and they can send it to you. And if you have a pipeline built that says, okay, I'm gonna OCR that and extract the URL, and then I'm gonna go throw that in my retro hunt systems and or block lists, like it's super good. But build a reporting flow and start tracking those things. Voice phishing is a little bit harder, but it's still doable. Alert for new domains for you and for your infrastructure. Like you probably have third-party providers. Like there are a lot of IT third-party outsourcers in the world. They've been getting whaled too. if you use them, you should probably have them in your envelope of stuff to monitor. So if you don't remember this domain, does anybody remember this domain? It's like way back. Do you remember what it's from? Yep, exactly. July 2020 Twitter breach. Like, this is the domain they registered. And so alert for brands, alert for your brand, alert for things in your portfolio of services. Certificate transparency logs are amazing also. It's like one of my favorite techniques to do threat hunting, or at least proactively, and to discover attacker infrastructure that you may not know about through other means. So if you're Twitter, like literally their Okta instance was twitter.okta.com. I don't know what their VPN instance was, but VPN.twitter.com was an Okta Twitter phishing page. It was just a clone, like a super lazy web clone, like exactly the same. So if you're doing certificate transparency log parsing for your brand and for your portfolio brands within your envelope, you might note that VPNtwitter.com is from Cloudflare. Cloudflare provides 3-month free certs for anybody who wants to generate them. So you see a lot of people using them both for fun and profit and also for real work. So the thing to note is that VPN.twitter.com is signed by VeriSign. And those things don't have a high degree of overlap. So this should automatically be super sus. These two things together, like new domain plus the CTL gap between the two, CAs, should be super, super high alert. This is a URL scan. I'll click on this. It'll probably screw up the whole presentation. We'll see. Yeah. That's the Twitter phishing page that got them whaled. That VPN.Twitter got the copy of VPN. So cool. URL scan's great. It's incredibly low cost. Highly recommend you use it at work. You almost could like credit card this yourself and try and expense it. I have an account just for funsies, but not for work. So coming back to SSO and IDP logs, the log output you get from O365, Azure AD, Okta, whatever else you're using, Duo, G Suite, has pretty good data, but it doesn't have certain things that you might want to care about. So we talked earlier about LAPSUS TTPs, where they use commercial VPNs, they use proxies, and that's where they hop to you from, or that's where they try to whale your employees from and pass credentials from. So the way this would manifest is I'm on, I don't know, NordVPN as LAPSUS, and I get your employee's username and password, and I type that into, well, it's not typing because it's automation, but your exit node is a VPN exit as the attacker, and that's what authenticates to Okta or Azure AD. So you're on these known VPN networks. So this is a pain to do yourself. Spur is a great service that's really low cost, highly recommend. They do this for you, and you can basically just ingest the data and cross-correlate with your Okta or Azure AD logs. And you can say, okay, well, like, Jason logged in from this place today, and I know that's this hotel, or I know this is PSU, and I know Jason's in Portland, so it's fine. I know that Jason is not in Helsinki on NordVPN today, adding an additional two-factor method. So things like that are really, really powerful to cross-correlate. Most log sources for SSOs don't give you that data. So you want to enrich it and provide that context for analytics. This comes back to behavioral analysis. So I worked a lot of unfortunate incidents in my career, and I've seen a commonality, whether it's SSH or browsers. User agents and SSH client strings are different for attackers almost always than actual employees, almost always. The SSH thing is a whole nother thing I won't get down because that's not this talk, but user agents, session IDs, IPs, and behavior, you can do for your employees. It's not super hard. You can do cohort analysis for yourself over time and build analytics to do that. It's not that difficult, and it's incredibly powerful. And the obvious outcome of that is like, hey, you did something dodgy, I'm going to go talk to you and or disable your account or reset your account. So yeah, you can also cross-correlate with other log sources. So for example, if I'm on a work laptop and I'm doing work things, the Okta event is mapped to me hitting remitly.okta.com on a browser on my work machine. So you can cross-correlate these things. So the more data sources you get together, the easier outliers are to spot. So I don't know, I've been preaching this for a long time. I think they call this XDR. I don't know. You don't need a fancy product for it, just like do it. Deception is a whole nother category. You should go see Sasha Levy talk about this at 12:30 in the main track. She's right here if you want to say hi afterwards. Sasha and I work on the same team. So coming back to mitigations, nobody wants to eat broccoli 3 times a day. 10,000 steps is actually hard. That takes effort every single day. This is awkward. This is real awkward. How many of your CEOs read the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and maybe Bloomberg or Forbes every day? Like all of them, right? Your boards do. How many of them mentally don't connect that like we're next? It's hard, right? It's super hard. So whether it's executives funding security programs, executives deciding to not support security initiatives that might be less palatable in some orgs, it's a hard problem, but it's part of our challenge with respect to LAPSUS and other attackers. And the more we can inform and do our due diligence to educate people as to the concerns that we see in a language that's relatable to executives and your board, the better off we'll all be. And hopefully, they'll fund programs and they'll fund projects and they will support initiatives that will cause change. Another not so fun topic to talk about, what's reality of business today, right? So MGM is an exceptional outlier, exceptional outlier. One of thanks to SEC for all these new filings that publicly traded companies must submit to. It's kind of a nightmare if you're one of them. One of the things that came out this week is MGM lost approximately $100 million in revenue due to their recent incident. Oh, in profit. Oh, thank you. That's an important detail. That's even much worse then. That's much worse. That is so much worse. That's so bad. And so I think they also said, please correct me if I'm wrong, I think they also said the incident cost them about $10 to $15 million in cost to do the incident. So that's just lost revenue. So if you work in this field, I encourage you to go read your cyber insurance policy. Seriously, I'm not kidding. Go read it. I inserted myself into this process where I've worked a few times now, and it's eye-opening. You probably will not have a policy that big. The reality is, again, MGM's an outlier. It's spectacularly bad, but they're not the reality. The reality is it costs like $2 to $5 million per publicly traded company that has an incident, and insurance pays for it. It sucks. It's painful. It costs the company a lot of money to do things, and then sometimes they get reimbursed partially or majority or all through insurance. That's good because you can buy insurance that will defer your risk, or it will transfer your risk to someone else. So that's great. We all should want that. We all want insurance for ourselves. For companies, the vast majority of them are not MGM. They're smaller, and so the cost of doing things in executives' minds might come back to the cost of this breach is less than what I have to spend to do all the security shenanigans. That's crappy, but that's business in some places. Hopefully it's not where you work, but if you can translate those dollar costs to things that don't map to like 7-figure breaches in your organization, they're much more palatable. So culture's an interesting one. Culture's just people, right? And culture changes. It's just a collection of people and their behaviors and norms. But culture is a challenge in every organization I've worked in. I've worked in very large, we'll say, nonprofits, governmental entities. I've worked in very small tech companies. They all have their distinct cultures. If you work at maybe Citibank, your culture is probably going to be very different than if you work at Intel. You're going to treat your machine differently. People will treat things differently in those organizations. And if you're at some 50-person startup somewhere else, different still. There's a notion in everyone's mind, this is my computer. It is not your computer, it's your corporation's computer. That's the reality. People treat it like their own. They expect it to be treated like their own. And I just encourage us to think a little bit differently about this. So what if your computer was a work truck? And it had the logo of your company on the side. It's an easy mental shift to make, right? Take your laptop home. You're gonna watch YouTube, maybe. Netflix, maybe. Something else, you're gonna do random Google searches. If that was a work truck, you wouldn't do that. Because your logo would be displayed on the side, and you'd be driving it around at 3 in the morning doing random stuff. So think of it that way. It's a mind shift that's hard to make for most people. And so they just treat their computers like their computers. And especially engineers. Engineers are the hardest to monitor. We're catered to because we're special and we make stuff happen. And we get to do kind of whatever we want. And we do the most shady things. We do the most shady things. Whether it's endpoint, whether it's AWS, whatever. Like we do sus stuff like constantly. And that's just normal. So that's part of our challenge. Application allow listing, I don't know, like I don't want to do that myself. I want somebody to do it, but I don't want to run in front of that because it can be challenging. You need good engineers. You need good comms people. You need good project managers, but especially good engineers. And if you're doing like ClickOps, you're going to have a bad time. So coming up with like a phased rollout plan that makes a lot of sense, doing appropriate testing and qualification, not everyone does. And again, back to my MacBook. I do what I want, especially if I'm an engineer. And same for browser extensions. Like, how dare you? I want, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like a very popular over time backdoored Chrome extension, but there's so many I have to choose from, it's hard to pick one. Right? So people have a conception that Chrome is for kids in schools. Chrome OS is for kids in schools. I have a $1,200 Chromebook. It's awesome. It has a beautiful screen, great interface, great hardware. I love it. It's old. I'm not getting rid of it. It still works well. It's really well supported. But there is a perception, especially in recent years amongst parents, that have their kids like $350 Dell Chromebook come back home and it's garbage and they don't like it. Sir, you have a question? I mean, security key. You're actually reading ahead. Thank you. No, it's great. I'm happy. Thank you. So passwordless auth is super hard. Back to that gentleman's point. You can't do this with everything. It's a real problem. Like, I've had a security key for a long time, since 2013, at work. You can't use it for everything in WebAuthn mode. FIDO2 mode is also challenging. So you have a conflation of different, you have an infrastructure that you're authenticating to, like Microsoft or Okta. Then you have your operating system, and then you have the app itself. So the classic example is Okta plus macOS plus Office. You can't do FIDO2 because Microsoft publishes some little special bespoke browser that requires you to authenticate to O365 to get your license that doesn't support that. Like, how hard is this? Not hard, but nobody's doing it. It's not like on a product manager's roadmap to actually care about, unfortunately. So yeah, there's a website, fido.fail. It's pretty like bare bones, but you should all contribute to it because FIDO2 doesn't work everywhere and it's really painful. The zero trust beyond court model, not trivial to do well either. It actually takes good engineers and forethought and a long time. Like there's no flag day where you're just like, we're behind everything now unless you want to like get fired. That's not going to go well. So phase rollouts are the way to go, and it can be a long tail. So you have to start with criticality or critical services first and roll those in. And also mobile. Like, what the heck do you do for EDR mobile? Like, who wants to put your Android in supervised mode and give me access to it? I don't want that. But if you want to support iOS and Android, this is a problem you have to deal with. And iOS and Android might just be a user agent. So if you can just set your user agent to iOS or Android and authenticate to Okta, maybe you get different controls applied to you at access time. And that's a real problem for us. We don't have good answers yet. Detection response challenges. I've been in the detection engineering space for a while, and I've built a few teams at a few different places, and I will tell you there's one commonality amongst all of them. This takes a lot of knowledge to even know how to do. You need tooling, and then you need a bunch of really smart, incredibly expensive, and high-demand meat bags to go do that work for you, right? So is anyone like, oh, yeah, there's a surplus of detection engineering skill set in the world. Let me go like lowball this candidate. Has that ever happened to you? No. I don't see that changing anytime soon either. So this challenge around knowledge, tools, and meat bags is not going away. Like, it's hard to build it, and it's really hard to buy it. I would articulate it's harder to buy it. I would articulate you can't buy it. I would articulate it's a failure of the market because we can't go buy this. So maybe there's a good startup idea for somebody, not me. So some key takeaways. Social engineering will always work. You're never at 0%. Like, what year is this? We shouldn't be doing phishing tests. We shouldn't be making people change passwords. Like, social engineering will always work. And if you start from this premise that that's always going to work for some percentage that's higher than 0, where 0 is your acceptable rate, you need a plan for it. So please, like, accommodate social engineering as a known viable model for attackers in whatever authentication platforms you deploy and configurations you deploy. So all 2FA is phishable. All of it. Like, I stand by this. Like, again, like LAPSUS is winning, prove me wrong. FIDO2 is the way to go, by far. You can do like step up challenges that might be FIDO2. Maybe that helps, I don't know. In practice, that gets real muddy. But if you're doing things like, nobody should be doing telephony, like SMS or calls, that's just bad for corporate accounts. It's fine for your bank. Like, LAPSUS is not coming for you and your bank account. That's okay. But we have to disambiguate like the advice we give to people at work with the advice we give to people at home. Like, if you want to get SMS for your bank, totally fine. I actually challenge you to find more than 3 banks in the US that will support FIDO2 security keys. USAA is like the only one that comes to mind. Maybe that's my sample bias, I don't know. But I challenge you to like find that. It's hard to find. But that aside, you know that you're going to get whaled at work. So you have to design a process that accommodates that. Malware happens. Like, drive-by downloads happen. Typo squatting happens. Malicious search results happen. We know these things. We need to plan for them. And we can accommodate them. They're kind of solvable. The zero trust beyond corp style model, yeah, it's challenging, but it's worth it and it's doable. And I say that because I've worked on really small teams that have done it. Like, we don't have 30-person teams, we have like 6. So it's doable. Detective controls are great if you are very, very, very fast in your detection loop. And I'll also note when I say this, I'm including response. Like, if my log pipeline takes an hour to do an analytic event where it says I'm going to page somebody and then it pages me at 3 in the morning and then I get to a computer and then I get the sleep out of my eyes and I turn my lights on and I log in, an hour to 2 have already gone by for the attacker. I won't tell you the answer, but I'll challenge you. Go do S3 copy operations for buckets and see how much data you can steal in an hour. Pro tip, be in the same availability zone. If you're in US West 2, attacker infra needs to be in US West 2 as well. But still, you can steal a lot of stuff. So an hour is not good. 2 hours is even worse. I want automation as much as possible. And I'll also note prevention's better. It's much more efficacious, and it will raise the noise floor for your alerts significantly, and it will make it much, much harder on LAPSUS and friends, and all the other attacker classes that you're going to be threatened by. And it will raise costs on them significantly. So suggestions, coming back to executive psychology and internal work culture and funding and priorities. We got into this game because we're hackers. Culture is the biggest lever you can have. Deploy preventive controls. Ensure rapid detection and response. Make friends. If you are in a vertical that makes, I don't know, widgets, Acme widgets, like, befriend your colleagues in that vertical. Talk to them, see what's on their radar, see who's attacking them, and trade data. Like, you may think, oh, lawyers won't let us do that. Yeah, they will. They totally will. And sharing is caring.